Welcome back. And as was mentioned earlier in the show, our first segment for today is talking about the release of BAFFU, the printed version. We've had them on before, artists that have been involved, talking about the online version. But I believe, Yasser, you said after 2.5 years, you've finally made it to print. And so we have two of the editors joining us on set. We have Yasser Musa and Kieran Gabriel. Good morning and welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
And congratulations on getting your magazine printed.
Yes, we are very happy and we are grateful that we can now have a printed copy, physical copy. People like physical things still, it seems.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like a printed thing. But before we jump into it, what a BAFFU?
Oh, that's a good start to the show. BAFFU and Kya Gama. You have to ask your parents or grandparents what that term means. It's a Creole term that means, well, the context of it is that you're playing top, right, which is a game that you throw the top and you put if you have an opponent, you try to hit the top, but if you keep missing, it's called BAFFU and Kya Gama. So it's like you're trying, missing, and you can't hit. And I think that is a very relevant idea for a magazine because it gives us space to keep trying and to, yes, miss a lot, but in a developing context which we are in as artists and musicians and poets and thinkers and writers and poets like my young friend next to me, Kieran here. If we don't consider ourselves in a state of struggle and in a state of trying, then we will live in a kind of harvest key mindset, which is a apartheid mind focus that everything is beautiful, everything is perfect, jump off the ship, whatever. So BAFFU is a real ideological and a real philosophical word for us, meaning the openness of the try.
Okay. As artists or as Belizeans?
Well, we can't separate the two. Art and poetry and literature and education in general, for example, we live in a social system. It's a paradox to be an artist and being in a social system because all artists will know what I'm talking about here, which is that you exist in a state of solitude, exist in a mind frame of loneliness and a open space of the imagination. I'm not saying loneliness in any negative way. Loneliness and how you grapple with it and deal with it, that is where the spectrum of creativity is harnessed. And so when you live in that very isolated world, you have to then figure out a way to operate in the social space. And so today, 2016, in my view, it is even more important that artists and musicians and poets and people in the creative field recognize their social role. The actions that they take is part of a social system. It's not something to just be beautified or pretty or things like that. It is an engagement, a narrative, a negotiation you're making with your society. So yes, being an artist, being a Belizean, it is mixed.
Now, the reason I ask that is because we know that you, through your work with the Image Factory, you've continuously allowed a space for artists, poets, anybody who is a creative thinker to be able to publish or print social commentary. You push them in that direction. I think while everyone creatively wants to express the frustrations that artists feel, and we hear it every time we have them on this set, they know they have a safe space at the Image Factory to be able to let it out. Talk about what it's like working with artists in that particular environment. It's fascinating because we meet sixth form students who are in school learning art, and when we meet the first years or the high schools, there's a lot more openness. Yesterday I had some from primary school who want to be professional artists. And when we meet them at a later stage, they start to realize that there simply is no space for them within this country.
That's a hell of a question. Wow, for so early in the morning.
How do you work with them? Well, I know these are some of the issues you tackle in BAFFU.
Yes, and you said an important idea that Image Factory, we try to have this space and we're pushing. But I want to say, with this magazine, and I've been reflecting over the past 48 hours since we launched it on Monday, and I'll go quickly through a little brief history. In 1992, Ivan Duran and I opened an exhibit called -8. We were counting -7, -6, -5 to the end of the millennium. We really thought the world was coming to an end, at least ideologically, and it was. Nobody could have predicted Trump, right?
I feel like it,
yes. So, that moment, which was the 500th anniversary of the crash of Columbus and his people into the Americas, we recognized at that time that in Belize we had a very fanciful and a very nostalgic view of art, which is that it is something to present to other people, to tourists specifically, or to present a fake, a false narrative of who we really are, and that we present a mask to the population. And since then, until now I would say, what we have tried to do at the Image Factory is to what Amilcar Cabral, the great Guinean thinker and philosopher, said from way back in the 1960s, either you're going to make art to lie or to tell the truth. But anyway, art is going to be made. And so this magazine today has taught me more than what we had been doing in 1992, because it is a manifestation of how the younger artists see their reality. They are not as caught up today in this idea of professionalizing the art way of life. They are more interested in dealing with society and issues of society, which I think is a much bigger and important and significant role for art in a society. Not just, and I'm an art teacher, so there are many roles. One, to open up a child's imagination and expression, but as you get older, and Kieran will expand on this, his speaking and his voice is more important than the professionalization or the context of who he is as an artist.
I was going to ask you, Kieran, speaking of roles, how does your role as an artist play into your role as an editor of BAFFU?
Well, for one, you don't have to have bias. You have to have bias sometimes, and sometimes you have to push behind the artist, because the artists want their voice out there, but sometimes you have to be the force behind them to push them to say, yes, your voice is not. And sometimes it comes down to the point where you want it more for them than they want it for themselves. So BAFFU is that platform or that medium for them to to get their voices out there, so that we could actually appreciate Belizean work, because many times we always lowrate our artists. The term I don't like to use with our artists is local, because you make a song like with a chicken or something from whereby from Hapsing or whoever. But the thing is, even we have our youngest artist in this book is Inre Swayze, and he, at the time that he submitted his work, was about 5 or 6. Yeah, so he's the youngest artist in the book. So the importance, we must foster artists to help them to develop their voice, because we know oftentimes, and not me personally, but we have young kids that want to be artists, but their parents are telling them that won't sell, they won't make any money off that in Belize. So some parents kill the dreams of their kids before they get older, and we have a lot of zombies walking a deadline because they want to deal with deadlines. So our whole life we're dealing with deadlines. So
yeah, you know, I want to touch on that, because I think one of the things that fascinates me about the artists that are involved in this project and that have been involved in your BAFFU project is one thing: they are so honest and comfortable being honest. And this is something we don't see in society that often. One, it's not fostered. Secondly, there is a real threat of victimization for persons once they step out and call a spade a spade. Some are able to do so in a more tactful manner, and some are really just in your face that you're left a little bit shocked as to what you just heard. I remember, for example, I think it was Brigida, when she was a teenager and did the exhibit Society Killed the Teenager. I still remember it. Yes. And I think it was one of those moments that I saw an artist sit across from me and had zero fear that there were cameras around, zero fear that it was her first interaction, zero fear in putting her real feelings and thoughts, and she worked along with Ruel at the time, in a display at the Image Factory. And I mean, she was completing school, had to go out and look for work. All of these things would be something that as you get older, you start to consider. So I want to ask, what about this particular collection of artists that have been so deeply involved in BAFFU? And we're going to get into some of the work that they've put out, because the images are showing and people will begin to ask questions. But what about you guys? What has been the driving force in maintaining that sense of authenticity, that sense of fearlessness and holding up a mirror to Belize and society so we can look ourselves in our face?
Well, some of the artists have been honest. They like the magazine because of no censorship. Like, the magazine is this is the BAFFU universe, so you could say whatever you want and it comes to fruition.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they know that they have a responsibility as artists to bring forth their truth. So BAFFU is that platform where they can expound on their truth without any fear of being victimized by any institution or any political system or yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I always come back to this. If we understand history, we can be more appreciative of art. I was talking to some young musicians. They have a strange name for a band which I like, Sweet.
Sugar-free.
Yes, very good, yes. So a Belizean dentist student goes to Merida and hooks up with his Mexican friends and now is on Channel 5. This happens every day. This, in my view, is the space of art. I was explaining to the young musician that music has a 40,000-year uninterrupted history. In sub-Sahara, in Africa, in the Sahara, they have found rock gongs where the early Africans were sandpaper or smoothing the rock, and when you hit it, it's stone, not metal. It sounds like a steel pan. So we have from that archaeological evidence right up to when they are going to perform now, a 40,000 uninterrupted sequence that human beings have done called music in many cultures and so. So despite intolerance that you spoke about, despite prejudice, despite governments that want to quash and suppress art, it will always be the uniting force for people who recognize their basic humanity, that we are people and that we need to get along and interact and collaborate. And so this BAFFU is a product of collaboration. Just the editors, as an example. I feel like the odd person out because I'm 2-3 generations removed from them. But my participation has just been to listen to what is happening with them. And Kieran, as an example, if you see and listen to his poetry, there is nobody that can speak the way he speaks. He is the Paul Nabor of words, or the Andy Palacio of song. There's no difference in what they're doing, but they're just doing it on a different thread, a different fiber. You look at Katie Usher, who's another amazing editor of this magazine, and she wrote an amazing article on Nomul, what has happened with the destruction to that Maya archaeological site. She writes a lot of her poems are in there, as well as she did an amazing wall of all the people who were murdered last year when Kareem Clark, the young journalist, was killed. We look at Brigida Halak, and Marlena made a great reflection on that society killed the teenager, because Brigida was speaking to what the education system does to young people in a very visceral and a very powerful way. And then Rashid Palacio, who is now studying in Barbados, studying art and film and all that beautiful stuff. But if you look at his work in here, it's gripping. It's a graphic power that nobody else can unleash. So what I want to say in terms of the media of BAFFU, that is an important idea. Today we have what I call mega media, which is governed like from satellites and what is being brought to us 23 hours a day. And that is a new imperial form of numbing our consciousness, numbing our responsibility as Belizeans. And that media is interested in what is now called fake news. A US president was just elected based on fake news. And even our local media, if you look at the quantum of news that we have to digest, the amount of information, not just that it's negative, but they're reporting the reality, but there is so much information that we are then forced into not accepting information. That is a big issue. And that source and that quality is thrown on the wayside for first.
Expediently.
What is first? What comes up on my screen in that in all those things that happens on your phone? That is more important now than the quality and the source. So this magazine, although it has taken so long, it is the longer road, the longer march that we are on, where to do something right, we have to tell the children the truth. It is hard, it is difficult, it will involve a lot of argument and back and forth discussion and confusion, but that is the process of quality and the process of good art. And we have amazing artists in this country.
Yeah, and even Brigida said in her blurb in the beginning, said that a tourist came up to her and said to her that I just think that Belizean art is just, all this while I thought Belizean art was just the toucans and the jaguars and the Maya ruin. So tourists are believing that the tourist art is the actual is Belizean art. So when you see this art coming forward, everyone was like, where is this hiding? So BAFFU is the society, is a reflection of the society we live in, where people want to speak, but we always, like as Junagang would say, we crucify people on crosses. So whatever statement we put out, we are getting crucified for it. So we have to be careful who we nail on cross.
So let's get into some of the technical details. You have done 9 electronic versions of BAFFU, and it was really a cost consideration putting it online at first, right?
Well, good thing you brought it up. 2 things. It started off online with the motivation that online we could attract more viewers and people to read it, and that's true still.
Yes.
Because Kieran, these guys do an amazing job of putting it all over the place. I have no idea how that is done, but I just trust them fully. But one issue, I think it was number 5, got over 5,000 downloads, and we could record that. We could only afford to print 500, so this is a limited edition. So the first 9 editions that went online from June 2014 to August 2016, in quantum, it added up to over 900 pages. Now, if you were to print 900 pages, everybody will go bankrupt. And involving over 300 artists, writers, poets, graphic designers, right? So that massive quantum, we could never compete with in the printed world.
Yes.
So this printed one is a kind of synopsis, a scan of not necessarily the best, but what we did was a kind of round robin. All the editors put BAFFU 1, what are the pages you would put in the printed, and then we did a kind of a shuffle, and we decided which, all of us, the consensus. So it's really a consensus on us 5. Obviously it still has bias, but we are the ones that were there from number 1 to number 9. That's the problem of editing.
The printed version of BAFFU is a compilation or a selection,
that's a better word,
of the previous 9
plus
online.
things that came after that 9th one.
All right, let's talk about the reaction since you released on Monday.
All right, maybe we could start.
Any particular page, story, article, photo, imagery that has really stood out to people?
Well, we have one that stood out to people, or a couple from, like, well, my favorite was when we did it, was on the cover. This was a picture of the Grandmaster Leroy, the Grandmaster Young, and this was done by Rashid Palacio. What you can look closely, he took a picture and then he added his flair to it and created this graphic image that became the cover for our 9. When I took it to Grandmaster and I showed him, he was like, "Whoa, I look that good." So we had various issues, and then of course some of the issue that jumped out to people, because I shown it to a couple like the Belizeans from the generation before, and they were like, if I was the printing press, I wouldn't even print some of this, and some people reaction was like, oh, this is too real for us. So we had positive reviews, we have mixed reviews from both sides, but both of them are necessary because it helps to foster what we are going to do for the next issue and going forward from there.
Two things I want to say about that. And as you were asking the question, it reminded me of the last pages of Roberto Bolano, a Chilean writer. He had a book called 2666. He's dead, but the book is about 2,000 pages, and it took me many years to finish it. I finally finished it early this year. But in the end, he talks about him being an artist and having to listen to so much gossip, because he was a very provocative artist in his city. And people would always gossip, oh, he's the guy that does that, and really make up a lot of stories about him. And he ends his book by saying, by describing that feeling, which is that if you listen to others only, what is the detriment of that is like you're allowing cockroaches into your mind to eat at the last bite of your soul. Or you can decide what he decided to do very young when he was a boy flying a kite. And this is what provoked him to be a writer. I want to be like the wind that is governing that kite, and that if it meets a mountain, it just turns around. If it goes on the sea, it helps ripple. I mean, he does it far more poetically than I'm describing it, but it was a long book. But the point I'm making, you have to either decide if you're going to be an absorber of what others think and say, or the wind and just go. An artist that I admire a lot is Katie Usher, because of that mindset that she has. In this BAFFU, there is examples of her lab. She opened a thing called The Lab 2 years ago, where she invites any artist to just come there and do what they want. And we've documented it. If you go to imagefactorybelize.com, there's a section called The Lab, and there are maybe 100 videos of different artists doing different things. There's also all the electronic versions for free at that same site. The point is, this BAFFU is an unleashing, a rolling out of our red carpet. You can say what you want about it, but it is what it is. It is a harnessing of the creative confidence that people hold inside. And so I think that concept is what Kieran described earlier, no? That yes, we will hear, of course you will hear critiques and so, but that to me is absolutely
I think, and to be very clear, you put out a product to be consumed.
Exactly.
And whether it's liked or disliked is a different story. And
then we even have this image here with Marvin Vernon when we were having we were having a BAFFU meeting, and we had some Belizean Americans that came in and they saw this picture and said, "Why did you have this picture up? That picture is so disrespectful." And like, we were just in awe of her.
It's one of the lady with
the gun, the elderly lady with the gun.
So our nickname for her was Granny the Gun. So this is what the society is. This is what the society is now. The Granny the Gun. The society is so bad that Granny have to have a gun to defend herself. So that was the strength of the image, but the whole idea of the magazine is to provoke a conversation. The conversation that we refuse to have with our children, and we refuse to have amongst ourselves, because we do not like to look at the mirror. We do not like to look in the mirror and look and like the image that we see. So
go ahead. I was thinking, taking it all in, I don't like to define what art is, because art is whatever you feel to express at whatever given time. How difficult is it? Because this is a lot. This is a lot of things. It's poetry, it's visual art, it's photography, it's videos that you have. How do you contain it to the point where it doesn't get too lost in translation, as this are just art garbage, or you know, a diarrhea of my creative innuendos? How do you keep it contained to the point where it's palatable for people who don't get art, and it's palatable for people who get art as well?
That is an awesome question. Let me address it this way. Our education system is a closed box of boredom. No one questions the 400 million plus investment we make every year in a closed box, boring space. We don't critique it. We don't ask what would be great to transform it. But when artists unleash the avalanche of ideas and thoughts, we feel that there has to be some containing this. There's a natural side of us that wants containment, that wants security, that wants things placed perfectly in an area. I think a small society like Belize would do itself more injustice if we continue down the path of forcing definitions upon things. We don't have a culture of openness. And this is just a small drop, in the bucket. This is an insignificant drop in the bucket. How many magazines have been published in Belize other than Destination Belize, which is not for public consumption, right? That is, to use your term, a vomit of the fantasy that is not us. So I think that the day will come when we see art and education and music and inspiration, all of these things are moving in an abstract space, not in a silo that this is here and that is here and that is here. That it's moving and swirling so that when the child, and there's a thing called Zentangle which you guys talked about, when the child is given one pattern, their mind can then explode into a multiplicity of patterns. It's triggering, right? It is the fostering that Marlene talked about earlier. It is the harnessing. We have to be in the business of fostering and harnessing, not in the business of saying, this is this is that. Yeah. That to me is the danger, because if we accept the human imagination as having the capacity to solve problems, then we will be looking towards more openness rather than just accepting, okay, wait till the teacher tells you what is right. To me, I'll end my crazy diatribe there. The answers are not as important anymore as the questions. Google has all the answers. If you add up every single day of our education system for the past 100 years, Google has 1,000,000 times more answers than that. What Google doesn't have is how and why we must unleash the imagination of the Belizean children. Google will never want that to happen. They want you to consume their stuff. So the questions are more important than the answers.
Lastly, as we wrap up, where can people get copies, and how do you hope this will impact the larger society and the art society within Belize?
Well, you can get the books at the Image Factory, and you can also get it at KO's Internet Stationery and Books on 31 West Canal. Okay. The books are going for $20. So it's a good Christmas gift where you can give to someone who loves arts, or send
somebody who wants a reflection of Belize.
Yeah, and also that's why BAFFU is the society we want to create, where we have people of different views, but we're not going at the pettiness of crucifying them for their views. We're respecting their views and allowing them to be. BAFFU is a society we want to create, the society Belize fears to create, because people might lose control over the population because of the free thinking.
Well, this has been a great conversation this morning, and we really appreciate it. Of course, you can pick up your copy of BAFFU. It's limited print, as you pointed out before, but you can be able to see the other 9 online versions at the Image Factory website as well. Thank you so much for being here. Best of luck, and we know we'll have you back soon. So
thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take that break. When we come back, we'll be talking about staying safe in the Christmas season with the Belize Police Department, so stay tuned.